Okay, welcome to class. I like your house sweater. Okay, you're welcome. I know you've heard that already today, but it's worth repeating. I felt like your reflections last night were so good. And part of me just wanted to like read them aloud to you today because they were so good. But I think all the pieces of the year are coming together in a really confusing and unhelpful way. Right? Like action potential is very straightforward and we can understand what happened. And it's like the more information we collect about the nervous system and the brain, the more confusing it becomes in terms of our bigger questions. So I thought we'd start with kind of like summarizing how we got where we are. So like what are the main points that we've learned about? And then how are they coming together in the conclusions you came to last night? Some of the reflections were kind of sad. The consensus seemed to be there is no free will. I think almost everyone said that we really aren't in charge of our own decisions and our own actions. So let's start with where we were, and then we can break up into pairs. And I want you guys to chat about your reflections, and then we'll talk about them as a group. Okay, so we started with action potential. What did we learn when we talked about action potential? Why did we start there?
Just one of the basics of how the brain works.
Yeah. Like what kind of basics?
How do neurons work?
I don't know, because they're the building block, right? Yeah. So Holly loved that there was so much chemistry, right? Very straightforward. There were confusing parts, but you can understand the chemistry. It sort of works the way it works, and you learn it, and you're good, and you understand how action potential works. Then action potential brought us somewhere else. Where did we go after action potential? Neurotransmitters. Good. This is right. And once we really got into neurotransmitters, that took us down the path we've been down the past couple of days. What did we learn about neurotransmitters in rats? Wait on you because you're smiling. You enjoyed it. How did the rats react to their fun experiment?
When the neurotransmitters released, the nerve was like, "Yay, this is good."
Which
You're having dopamine.
Yeah. You get really into your lever.
Yay,
We're happy. Yeah. What if you take the dopamine away?
and you get really sad. And you don't do anything. And you get
Okay, so we talked about neurotransmitters, motivation, right? And then what else did we talk? Because that was the rat's own dopamine. What else did we talk about? They're like neurotransmitters, but your body doesn't make them.
Drugs.
Yeah. And things just in general that mess with action potential. I guess caffeine is a drug. Okay, so this is how it works on a basic level, right? Take a step up. We start to see how neurotransmitters shape our actions, right? And then we move on to drugs. So now how is something artificial shaping motivation, shaping decision making? And then finally, we went to, what did I put it in my notes? It was like brain injury and pathology. Okay, what do I mean by that? What did we talk about?
How just like brain injury and certain, issues within the brain, how do they cause, people to be more aggressive? How do they cause people to change their personalities?
Change personality. And then I'm going to write a bigger. Okay, self and identity. So if neurotransmitter shaped motivation, if we're a product of evolution and the way that different neurotransmitters were released helped us diversify our diet, it helped us know that we should like sugar because it's got this good payoff in terms of energy. If we are sort of created by evolution to be who we are. And these things change our personality, change our actions. And where does our self reside? Right? And that was the big question yesterday. So we looked at different individuals, like different criminals, who their crime, their action was a result of a brain tumor. They were all brain tumors, weren't they? Like, and what else? No, just brain tumors. But the fact that that injury could so drastically change who they were, right? I think your person in particular, Charles
Whitman.
Whitman, I didn't start telling you, right? I thought his was particularly interesting in talking about self because he was experiencing the effects of the brain tumor. And how did he reflect upon that?
He knew he had no control.
Yeah. So what does that tell you about self versus brain chemistry? It's a leading question.
Yeah. The brain chemistry, I guess, is just like forces that push the self, but the self is its own thing.
Yeah, maybe, right? It's hard to say, but it's a clue that maybe there's some sort of greater self. Okay, so that is the past. Last night, let's summarize the video and then I'll have you break up and share your reflections with each other or just the main ideas. Tell me some interesting stuff about the video.
Well, he used a lot of interesting examples to show that we can trust our own senses. He showed us color theory with the Rubik's Cube, where one side was shaded, one side was in the light, and it had two squares of the Rubik's Cube. And took the shading away or took the Rubik's Cube away, it was the same color.
What was his main point about that?
His main point was that if you can't trust your senses, your most basic sense, vision, which is something that most of us have for all hours of the day, like sleeping aside. If you cannot trust this basic sense, how can you trust that you are in control of your own functions?
We have lots of practice using sight, right? Use it all the time. We have more practice using vision and making decisions based on that than we do making decisions about money and other more new things in human existence. But I think the most interesting thing is sort of what Logan was picking up on. We knew that those colors were the same on the different sides of the Rubik's Cube. Could anyone convince their eyes and their brain to see them as the same color? Even though we knew that they were the same color? You can know it, but your brain's still gonna do what it does. Max, did you?
Yeah, so I guess he used like a bunch of other examples with like surveys and advertisements in which like we have this feeling that we have the ability to make rational decisions. We're able to think through everything really well. We have this sort of like executive thought that's just like much better than all other animals really. But in reality, like even just small like external factors can influence exactly like what we think. So it's not really like that we have this ability to think rationally, but we're rather influenced by everything else around us to pick a certain thing.
Was that surprising?
Not really.
No? That's surprised. Data?
Were you surprised? Were you surprised at how those little factors can shape the way that you make decisions?
I don't think I was surprised. I think the level to which it was shown was interesting. I don't think the fact that like the idea itself was surprising. I think the level to which it was demonstrated was surprising.
The organ transplant one, I thought the statistics were, like you said, like the extent to which the decisions were controlled. Do you guys remember that example and sort of the difference between the numbers? Tell us about it.
It like in the graph how certain countries like the level of organ donation participation. And the countries with the lower end like really, really encouraged it in all of their media. But on like the DMP form, like it was check here if you want to. And then on the countries with like the highest participation, it was check here if you don't want to. Show me.
Almost 100%.
Yeah, most of them were like
in the
completely
teens.
because people would. It was rather a choice of like ignore it or actively do something.
Mm-hmm. What about the what was the example?
Give two guys.
Oh, no, the doctor one. Although we can talk about that one next. Okay. If you're a doctor, right? If your job is to take care of your patient and to make the best decisions for them possible, you're sending your patient off to hip replacement, which is a big surgery. Right? You don't want to get your hip replaced unless you absolutely have to. And they find out that they didn't do what?
Gives the patient
They didn't try ibuprofen. Okay, so did they cancel the surgery? Yes, most do. They're like, okay, you're right. We need to try ibuprofen. So that's the big inconvenience, right? Is saying, oh, we had planned the surgery, we scheduled the surgery, and now we have to cancel it. But they do. What changes their mind in the third scenario?
There's one other thing that they needed to try. I don't remember the name.
Yeah, it was not ibuprofen.
Yeah.
It was a bigger word. Yeah, medication option number 2. It turns out you didn't try 2 medications. Should we still pull him back? Every logical piece of my brain said, obviously, if you didn't try one and you pulled the patient back and said, let's try this medication before surgery, well, now you have 2 options. That's like double the reason to pull the patient back. And yet what happened?
They accept them to hip replacement.
Sent them to hip replacement. It was like almost all of them left the patient to still get hip replacement surgery. That makes no sense. Right? How did the speaker explain it?
This one's kind of more than one option, then it complicated it.
Yeah.
So then they just decided to go with the option that they originally chose,
Mm-hmm.
which was hip replacement.
It's so sad and scary to think that like our health and well-being are, in the hands of decision making that is so easily manipulated. But I don't think that the doctors consciously knew that. They're not like, oh, it's too big of an inconvenience to decide between 2 drugs. Just put a fake hip in. And yet those little pieces completely manipulated the way really intelligent professional people who are like dealing with other people's health and well-being made decisions. So let's see one more example. Let's do the dating one because that was fun. Tell us about it.
So I forgot the names of it. Common. I can tell it Jerry. Yeah.
It was time to do. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
He would give these 2 men to be participants. One was named Tom, and one was named Jerry. They're both pretty similar in appearance, but they're still different. But I forgot what percentage, but proportion of the people.
Like a dating thing. Like look at them and see who would date.
Another option, which would be an uglier version of Tom or an uglier version of Jerry. And because this uglier version of that one person was there, they would often pick the better alternative of that person. Because the worst option is there.
So when Ugly Tom is not here, Tom and Jerry, I don't remember if it was 50-50, but it was close, right?
Yeah.
Well, once Ugly Tom is there, what happens to Tom?
Everyone loves Tom.
Everyone loves Tom. What is I loved the coffee example because I love coffee. Rome and Paris. They're both great places. 3 options. Rome with coffee, Rome without coffee, normal Paris. What do we suddenly all want? Rome with coffee, because Rome without coffee is like Ugly Tom. It makes its brother and sister option here seem all that much better. Right? So these are big, the doctor, who your potential life partner might end up being, where you travel. These are big decisions that are just easily manipulated by these outside factors that we're not aware of at all. And what's even scarier is even after you're aware of them, like with the visual thing, right? Your brain still will lean to a certain decision. You can know that those 2 colors on the Rubik's Cube are the same, but you can't change the way you see them, even though you know that they're different.
I thought one that was interesting was the price-based one where there was, I think like $75 for one subscription option, 125 for another with few perks, and 125 for a third option that had lots of perks without those both of them.
It was like the internet version was 50 something, right?
Yeah.
75,
It
whatever.
was 59 actually.
Good memory. 59. Paper was
25.
125. Paper and internet also 125.
And this, I mean, I thought it was interesting because a few months ago I read an article about how this is really common everywhere. Like movie theaters are especially prone to this. So if you look at like the popcorn sizes, you'll have small, say like what, $7 or something. You'll have medium be something like $10, and then you'll have large be something closer to like 11 or some like very slightly smaller than medium.
Mhm.
And so people there, they usually think, I'm not going to want a small. That's too small. And so they'll think to get the medium, but the medium is a worse deal than large. And so they will choose the large over the medium. And if you
Even if they don't
remove,
want that many, even if they don't want that much.
yeah, and if you remove the middle option, you'll see that they'll choose the small even more often than the large.
Do you guys find yourself being swayed by stuff like that out in the world as a consumer?
Well, I wouldn't call us consumers, but
I
I
don't
most
know.
definitely falls.
I think we are all very much consumers. Do we buy stuff? Like we go to the grocery store, we buy stuff, we do stuff for fun.
No, I mean like us. Here, like
I think even if you are not spending your own money, I bet you influence your
I
parents
consume
spending.
a lot.
Probably the consumer. I'm the worst. I'm the worst consumer. It's horrible. Like where things are placed in the grocery store or deals. Like I'll come home and like I bought a rain jacket for my son that was more expensive than the one he wanted, but it was 30% off. And I'm like, look how much money we saved. He's like, but it's not the one that he wanted and it's more expensive. I'm like, but look at it's higher quality. And like, I know that that's ridiculous. And yet, like, I'm just easily manipulated by the external factors that are like driving these decisions. Okay. Oh, I wanted to do like a breakup thing. But I have other exciting things to share. So let's just talk about our reflections as a whole. Given that ugly Tom can make you fall in love with Tom, or the fact that a brain tumor can turn you into a murderer, right? What do you guys think? Well, the way action potential works, neurotransmitters, are we chemistry? Or is there something sitting above our chemistry that is like at the heart of identity?
I would say to even be able to, the fact that we are considering that question is proof that we are more than like the fact that we are considering the question and are capable of deciding either way is proof that we are more than simply biology. I would say there's a degree of free will, but it's much less in certain scenarios. But there's also like there has to be a degree of free will, or it wouldn't be possible to even be able to come to different conclusions about this.
I would be careful using the word proof. Maybe it's evidence,
Okay.
or it might lead us to think the fact that we have consciousness, right? The fact that there's a branch of philosophy called phenomenology. I can't say it right now. Phenomenology. There you go. I wrote it down here. Write it on the board for you. Spell it correctly. Phenomenology. It's like the phenomenon of existence. What it is like to experience existence. When I was in graduate school, I studied the phenomenology of eating disorders. So like it's a lot of interviews and not what's happening in the brain, but what is the lived experience of that? And you're using this idea to say, and you are not the only person, there are many philosophers out there who agree, like the fact that we seem to be experiencing free will. there's a phenomenon of like being in our bodies, having our brains making decisions, is evidence that there is some sort of higher self outside of just neurons firing.
Max, you had your hand up?
Yeah, so I would disagree and say that based on, I guess, the evidence that we've been researching, it appears that we are nothing more than the structure of our brain, like as influenced by like our surroundings, environment, and like how we perceive everything. Because like in the cases of like the tumors and stuff like that, clearly anything that will mess up the structure of your brain messes up your entire personality, which would indicate that the structure of your brain is like your identity, because like the like something as like complex as personality, something that will define who you are, can be influenced by changing the structure of your brain, which would indicate that the structure of your brain is your is you.
So if we go back to this word and say, this is your experience of being you. This is your experience of making decisions, having consciousness. We change this. We change the structure of your brain. We change your experience. As opposed to, maybe with the exception of calling him your guy. It's not the person you researched. Because he did seem to have some like meta cognition that he could identify that something had changed and couldn't control it, but at least was like, this is not me.
I think there is the very slightest ounce of free will, but I think there's no personality. I think
What's
personality.
the difference? Can we try to tease those apart a little bit?
I think personality is how you act, and not. I don't think it's decision making related. I think your personality can affect free will, but I think that's the part of free will that doesn't exist.
Okay.
I don't think there's any personality whatsoever. I think it's just how your brain grew up, how your synaptic pruning happened, what pathways you used the most, what people told you was correct. I think that's all that there is.
The way that you phrased that made me so happy. It's like, yeah, it's kind of sad to think about, isn't it?
I guess I would almost completely agree. I think that free will, the problem with that is that I think that I don't know, because I feel like there's a chance we could have it and there's a chance we could not have free will. But I feel like I'm leaning towards the side where we do not have free will. I did some of my own research a while ago when I was interested in stuff like this. And I had like come across this theory in which like if we know the exact like state and location and of like every particle, we can predict exactly how
Yes, I was
they'll
reading about
interact.
that last night.
We can predict exactly how they'll interact with each other and exactly what will end up happening. And I believe that they use this in like hurricane simulations and stuff like that. But as there's so many particles, it causes this like chaos. Like if you've ever seen like a double pendulum, that's like a chaotic movement that it looks random, but it's not actually random. So I feel like that we're just so complex to the point where it feels like we have free will because we're so chaotic, but it's not actually free will.
I through the past weeks, I feel like I've like been falling into that realm of thought. And as I was thinking about where we were going, what we were going to discuss tonight, I was like, we need someone smart on the other side, coming up with a good argument that we can read. So this is going to be our homework tonight. Yes, free will exists, and we'll see if we're convinced by their argument. But we will leave this for tomorrow. I have some sad examples against free will I wanted to share with you that are I thought very thought-provoking. I'm going to erase Tom, Jerry, and Ugly Tom.
Okay, so there's something called ballistic movement. Ballistic, or so like if you shoot a gun, once you pull the trigger, you can't unshoot it. Right. So ballistic movement is like once you basically pull the trigger in your brain, the movement unfolds as it was sequenced to happen. So an example, from the person I was reading, like going like this, but then not hitting your hand. So that's a quick movement, right? And you stop before you hit your other hand. We can all do that movement, right? But the time it takes to send that series of action potentials, like the neural messaging to the brain and then back, would take longer than it would to start, go, and then stop as you approach your other hand. You know, coupled with visually seeing where it is. So you have to program that series of actions in advance. So as you are thinking about doing this movement, your brain puts it all together and then pulls the trigger and it happens. And in that sense, once you've pulled the trigger, you are unable to change it. You have no free will. Take a step back and think into the distant future about what job you want, right? That's far away, and there's plenty of time to react and adjust and respond. So he said that free will exists on a temporal gradation. What's temporal? Yeah, having to do with time, right? And so if someone plays with our brain and releases dopamine and we just want to hit a lever all day, that's immediate, right? Or if you're taking some sort of artificial drug that is blocking a receptor, stimulating a receptor, like we can't respond, we can't control the response in our brain. Okay. So this would be like immediate. And this would be future. So he argues that free will doesn't exist here, but that as we get further and further in the future, this is where we see stronger evidence for free will. What do you guys think? Or do you think that if this is more of an illusion, that really it's all the chemistry still? Lily, what do you think?
Wait, repeat the question, Marlon.
Do you agree that the closer we get to the action, the more out of our control it is, the more determined it is? And the further we get into the future, the more examples of free will or the more we're able to exhibit choice.
I don't know. I think it depends because with free will, I think everything that you do causes your decisions. So no.
So it's a whole bunch of immediate stuff that's leading to this. And if you add up all of the determined actions, they don't equal a free action?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you not? I don't know. I feel like making the choice in itself is a form of, we use this term free will so loosely. It doesn't really have a great definition.
That's a good point.
It has so many constraints around it. Like going off of just free will, it's assuming that everyone has the same brain that thinks the same way, which is inherently flawed in this argument. I mean, everyone, like Paulie said, grows up differently this after pruning. Everyone shapes their minds differently. So to say that free will can apply to everyone, it's a very problematic definition in its nature. I feel like as you get closer to the choice being made is kind of in itself, to me, a form of free will. The ability to make that choice and the ability to have options and thinking about them to reach your endpoint. I think that is free will. Or at least our very limited, constrained definition of free will.
Hold on your hand for a second. Everyone.
No, I have free will.
You passed the test. Actually, no, make a fist. And then raise a finger. Okay, did you guys, I told you to, but did you make the choice to do that? Did you control that? And you made the choice not to, right? If I connected electrodes to your finger and your brain and had you identify the moment you thought, I'm going to raise my finger, right? That thought would occur just moments before you actually raise your finger. But if I'm looking at your brain, with what's lighting up, what's happening, There's actually action potential that happens before you make the decision. Your brain is firing before you experience that phenomenon of choice making, which suggests that maybe your brain is making the decision for you, and then it feels like you're making the decision. There are some problems with this experiment. If you guys want to look it up, the researcher's name is Libet. It's worth ET, sorry. There you go. It's worth reading about. Sam Harris is a guy who sort of analyzes it and talks about it. But you read the original experiment. I think there are some flaws, but it's an interesting thought that something's firing in your brain, causing you to make that decision to do something as simple as fire off that network of pathways you've already programmed, which is raising your finger.
I was going to say, I might think it would be the other way around. Like you have free, well, in the like most immediate future, not you wouldn't necessarily, but like in the somewhat short term, you have free will. But then eventually, if you make enough choices a certain way, you can reach a point where you kind of don't have free will. Like you did determine what would happen, but you no longer have the power to determine it.
Once you set it in
like,
motion, it's just
yeah, like your choices led to it happening, but you no longer have the choice of continuing or stopping it.
Mhm.
So past you has had free will, and that, yeah.
I would disagree. I mean, you always have a choice. Like, let's say you applied to a college before and that was your free will. You can still just not show up. Like, you still have free will. Does not.
But have you put together your brain in a way to make that decision, right? Like, has everything that's happened in how you've grown your brain and how the environment has acted on your brain and the neural pathways that you've like pre-coded, has that led to the decision for you to apply and then not go? Feels like a choice in that moment. You might make a pros and cons list, right? And be like, oh, more pros, I'm gonna pick that side. But is that just because ugly Tom is somewhere making attractive Tom seem more attractive, and you were never gonna pick attractive Tom, but now you are?
I think like, okay, if I were to read an article about how killing turkeys is bad, maybe I can decide not to eat turkeys anymore. But if I had never seen that article, I would still eat turkeys. And I think that like everything in your life is based off of something that you've seen. So if there was like, you couldn't make decisions on your own, I think, without having a knowledge of what you like the consequences of your decisions.
So that's like what I'm hearing is it's maybe a combination of the action potential and neurotransmitters and all of that chemistry, but you're saying the environment is just as big of an influencer.
Yeah.
No, good.
And the knowledge that you build is what the environment supplies you.
But then that leads to the point that then we only have free will the moment we are born. But do we even have free will?
Do you
then?
even have free will then?
Because in the womb, the brain is being formed, and if there's, say, a nutrient deficiency in the mother, the brain is being formed differently. So do we ever have free will?
And then how do you know how to grow your brain in utero?
I mean, it's such a frustrating argument. It's very confusing. It's a lot like art history and just art.
You're
It's
like,
art-
your
one of-
class says it's already
but
worth
it- I think we have free will within the constraints of our own brain.
Okay, well, all right, I'm gonna pass this out. This will give us hope. Yes, free will news. Read this. Encourage you to maybe do some of your own research if you want to look up this argument. There are lots of critiques to it. We're working up to something fun. A short paper. Wow. I know. You were hoping for that. Thank you, everyone.
I don't think this is biologically accurate. I don't think the brain is shaped like a person.
No, this is everything we've learned so far. There's actually a little person inside your brain pulling
Yes.
strings. That person has free will, but you don't.
This is how the brain changes.